Hi, Seva. This is Anuj Mathur. Hey, Anna, this is Anuj Mathur from KPMG.
Hi, Anuj. How are you? Hi, Joe. Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Andrea. Hey, Joe.
Hi. So,
Hello.
I have a question. So, I'm going to be the Zoom captain for the meeting today, and I just want to know: Anna, is your name pronounced Anna or Anna?
Anna. Yeah.
Anna. Okay, great.
That's
I
perfect.
wanted to be sure that I
No
had
worries.
it correct. So you guys, thanks for, sorry, I was taking a bite of something. So I went off camera for a minute. Thanks for being part of this today. As people start joining, I'll help to kind of make sure they're on mute and get set up. Did Nick talk to you all about the schedule and like how we're going to run through things, or do you want me to give you a refresher?
Yeah, if you can give a refresher, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that'll be helpful.
Okay, great. So thank you. So how we're going to do this is that give or take, so we'll start right around 10:15. We're expecting about 30 attendees for this session, and from 10:15 to 10:20, I'll kind of give an overview for everybody so they know what the next indicated things to do are. And then from 10:20 to 11:15, we'll do the panel discussion and Q&A. I'm going to allow for, at the end, 10 or 15 minutes for question and answer, but I'll be asking everyone to put their questions in chat or clarifying questions, and I'll keep my eye on that so that we, if anything comes up, I'll let you all know. Then at 11:15, I'll put everyone into their discussion groups. And from 11:15 to 12:15, they'll be discussing the different questions. And then at 12:15, I'll send everyone back to this main session and then end it. And then everyone can go back to, I'll put in chat the main conference link again, so everyone can click on that to jump back to the main conference.
But Andrea, the panel for us ends at 11:15, right? That was as per the plan.
Yep, correct.
So we'll be done by then, so we can log off.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, Nick made a note, so let me read down, and then let me just see if I have that note in here so I can tell you exactly.
Sure.
Okay, once the panel ends.
So Andrea, quick question for the Q&A. You'll be reading those off the chat, right? Or should I keep an eye on that?
You can keep an eye on that as well, but I'm happy to interject as they, at the appropriate moments when those questions come up. So you can focus more on the panelists instead.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Okay. Anuj, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yep, that's correct, Anuj.
Okay, Anuj.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing where he said that to me. Here it is. The panel invites are only for the panel speakers, which is why they end at 11:15 rather than 12:15. So you all are on this until 12:15. I mean, excuse me, until 11.
Right, 11:15.
That's right, yeah. You just gave me a scare there.
I know, I gave myself a scare too. I'm sorry about that.
Imran.
Go smoothly. Hi.
How you doing? Sorry, I overslept. My car got broken into last night at like 3 a.m., so I had to run outside.
Oh no.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry I'm here super late. How's everyone doing?
Good, Alex.
Good. How are you, Alex?
Hi, Alex.
Been
Nice to
better,
meet
but
you.
So do you guys know, is this is the breakout session, I'm guessing?
It is. We'll be starting between 10:15 and 10:20 when everyone arrives from the main meeting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so we're just waiting at this time until all the attendees show up.
Okay, I'm gonna make some coffee, I think, and try to wake up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You have about 6 or 7 minutes to do that.
Right. And is this the healthcare or supply chain logistics breakout session?
This is the supply chain logistics.
Okay, cool.
Are you in the right place?
I mean, I'm a climate tech startup founder, so not quite, but I don't think there's a climate blockchain.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so sure, right place.
Not today. Not today, anyway.
Okay, cool. And what all you do?
Oh, so you're not one of the panelists?
Uh, I don't know, to be honest.
Did Nick send you this link?
Yeah, I got this link. I don't think from Nick.
Was it Callie?
Doesn't ring a bell either. Let me double check my email.
Oh, no worries. No worries. So the rest of us are setting up the meeting and we're waiting for the attendees to arrive. So Alex, it sounds like maybe you're the first attendee to arrive. Welcome.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so go make your coffee. Have no worries. Come on back. We'll start in about 6 minutes or so.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so let's do it. Right, we leave it if I'm going to do now. This is for, so the reason we have put Mathur one, I think, I don't know if they may ask.
Just wanted to give everyone an update. It sounds like most of the panel, or most of the participants will be arriving more around 10:20. I think it sounds like they're just wrapping up the main session right now. Jim Murphy, Jim, you're planning on being at the supply chain session, is that correct?
No, I think I was just joining this one is all I was joining.
Okay.
This is the supply chain panel, right? So you're saying,
Yes, this is the supply
Okay.
chain breakout session.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. So do you have both? Yeah, Anuj and I were both on it, but
Perfect.
happy to
okay.
let it, Anuj, yeah, but whatever you need, Andrea.
Thank you. Ah, it is 10:25. All right, it looks like we have about 10 participants right at this moment, which is great. I want to get started so that there's time for discussion. My name is Andrea Anderson, and I'll be your Zoom captain today. Welcome to the breakout session. I'm going to quickly explain how this is going to work, and then we'll go get going on the panel. Right now we'll spend the next hour or so with the panel diving deeper into supply chain logistics for this session. And after that, I'll put you into discussion groups for about an hour. Then around 12:15, we'll wrap up and head back to the main session. The questions on this panel were designed to help give a state of play and to surface challenges that you can discuss further after the panel and in your discussion groups, and that would be ideal. The goal of the discussion groups will be to come up with a few ideas for potential solutions to these challenges, and I'll give some more instructions on that after the panel though. Okay, let's get on to the panel now. So again, stay on mute unless you're a panel participant. Stay on mute during the panel and ask questions in the chat. If it's a clarification question or related to the current topic, we'll try to cover it during the panel, but we'll also try and give about 15 minutes for general questions at the end. And this is a relatively small group, it looks like, so maybe we'll adjust that as we go along. Again, my name is Andrea. I'm just the Zoom captain trying to do the logistics, but I want to welcome and introduce you to Anna Gabrielle Logo. She's the strategy and operations manager for MavenNet, and she will be your moderator today. So welcome.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, thanks, Andrea, to WTA and the entire team for putting this together. I've seen some snippets of the conference, and you guys are addressing some key themes in blockchain that I think are super important. But I was particularly looking forward to this panel because now more than ever, I feel like it's crucial to have these conversations about how we take this shiny new technology that is blockchain and actually implement it to make value chains more responsive. So yeah, let's get to it. I'll just ask the panelists to introduce themselves, a little bit about their companies and some of the work that they're doing. So Joe, why don't we start with you?
Sure, I'm Joe Rotes. I'm founder of Dragon Chain. We were launched out of Disney. We started in 2014 building our platform and open sourced it, released everything in 2016, commercialized it in 2017, and we've been building a lot of different things, mostly related to distributed proof and identity systems, but it's a very generic, flexible platform. So we do a lot of different things.
Thanks, Joe. Welcome. Anuj.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Anuj Mathur. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. I'm part of the KPMG's finance transformation practice based in Silicon Valley. I'm a managing director there, and we focus on holistic finance transformation for large and medium-sized companies, and also specializing into blockchain and some of the emerging use cases around the technology, and supply chain being one of the key areas where we are seeing a lot of traction. So excited to be here. Looking forward to a discussion here with all of you.
Awesome.
Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Anuj. Jim, over to you.
Okay. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Jim Murphy. I'm a partner with KPMG. So KPMG is a finance and accounting firm, and so Anuj and I are from the same firm. Listen, as we look at supply chain and how we solve different issues, they cover many different areas, including finance, accounting, tax. So we're here to give you a view as we go through this about what we're seeing in these areas. And one thing to know, so we lead our efforts in terms of interpreting technologies and blockchain in this area. So happy to share some of the stories that we're seeing in the supply chain, finance, and accounting. But what we do know is that, you know, we focus on many different industries, technology, pharma, industrial manufacturing. So there's many areas that we focus because finance is ubiquitous. So happy to be here with you today, and look forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks, Jim. So I feel like that's a perfect segue to my next question. I'd like us to start by framing the problem. Why is it that we're here and what are we addressing? So maybe if I could get you guys' perspective on what's the problem of global supply chains and what are your companies doing to address this? So why don't we start with Joe?
Gosh, I'm not a supply chain specialist, but as I would see the problem, it is for traceability of data and controlled decentralization and controlled transparency. You know, the ability to solve the problems with supply chain and how would I say, the various problems with just tracking what I would consider chain of custody of information generically, but if you apply it to shipping and everything else, that would be the piece, and that could be everything from philosophical pieces, child labor, slave labor, things like that, all the way to better tracking and being able to better ensure that the product is what it's supposed to be from the source.
Right. I feel like that's key. Being able to connect the physical asset to a digital representation in the supply chain to be able to unlock other use cases. So Anuj, would you like to share your perspective?
Yeah. So let's think about the supply chain, right? In a very traditional environment, and we all are consumers of products. So I have iPhone here. So think of iPhone as a product or any other phone, and start with the front end of the supply chain where the raw materials for that product comes from. There are different parties to the transaction who supply the raw material. From there it goes to a company or a manufacturer who picks up that material on the supply chain and converts it into a finished product. And from there, it goes to a distributor or a logistics or a transportation company. And from there, it goes to a retailer, which could be an online retailer, it could be a physical retailer, and then it goes to a consumer. So that is the entire play in a supply chain end to end. And at each stage in the chain, there are different parties who are interacting with each other, and there is a movement of goods and services and value addition on them. And then, of course, exchange of consideration, exchange of monetary compensation for each transaction. So if you think of it, the word supply chain itself, with the word chain in it, lends itself very well to a blockchain type of a solution, right? So and the real question is, how do you integrate all these different parties in the chain and create a unified platform where you have greater visibility, greater auditability, and greater access to information so that the parties can transact in a more seamless manner. So I think that's really to my mind, on a traditional supply chain, of course, we can, as we go along the discussion, we'll elevate the discussion to other non-traditional supply chain as well.
Awesome.
I
Great.
hope that
Thanks,
makes sense.
Anuj.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anuj.
Yeah.
Jim, so you mentioned a couple of areas that are important to have a flexible supply chain or a digital supply chain. Would you care to elaborate which area should we focus to digitize supply chains and to implement blockchain solutions?
Yeah, if I didn't, I think if I leverage what Joe mentioned in Anuj, as we think about certain assets coming into a company, or if it's a goods and service exchange, what have you, having a source of truth to know, hey, who ordered a certain asset, if it's a generator, or if it's a piece of a large assembly. So it could be a part of, it could just be the rivets or the bearings for an airplane, or it could be components of a large assembly of racks and servers, so down to like the connectors, etc. As you know, you may or may not know, in finance, when those purchase orders are generated, there are sometimes these things can explode into thousands of line items that make up one PO to order like a whole rack and server assembly. Now, where the problem comes and why it needs to be why we see it digitized is companies solve this problem today. So they go into their requisition system and they find certain information. They go into their enterprise resource planning system, which has their finance data, and they have data about the fixed asset. They also then communicate phone, email with their vendors, and also then the sites where maybe the asset was delivered and then installed. So to solve and answer those questions, you can imagine they cover many different groups and personas within a company. And what we are seeing, and I love sharing this because Joe and Anuj and I have had a prep session, is that these things, they need to have one source of truth. And what we're seeing is with the arrival of a platform such as blockchain, it's going to change the way people do work. So instead of going to all those different people or systems, they could have one source of truth where they'd be able to solve this problem quickly and accurately because it's immutable. So to us, we see the digitization of this on a platform like this is paramount. And the last thing I'll say, Anna, is that from what we have seen in doing this type of work, we're not asking the personas or the players that Anuj and Joe had brought up to change the way that they interact. I still use my procurement system. I still use my receiving system, etc. but what it does do, it needs to integrate into a platform so that there is one source of truth. So what's nice about it from a change management perspective, it's just changing the way people solve the problem, but not necessarily changing the process.
Right. Yeah, that's a great answer. And I'd like to unpack a couple of things that you each mentioned. So a single source of truth, being able to interconnect the different stakeholders in fragmented supply chains. Blockchain is designed for this. And we've been at this for a while now, since 2018 or even before. And we've seen blockchain evolve from this technology that was developed by hackers in their basements, grow into a solution that can be implemented in enterprises. But we haven't seen it truly scale yet or implemented in enterprise environments. So in each of you guys' perspective, what is missing to get to that state, that ideal state of interconnected supply chains and blockchain leveraging all of that? So I'll just leave that open to whoever wants to answer.
I can go first, Anna, on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Joe talked about, Jim talked about, and I also gave an example of a supply chain. That the biggest driver to adoption is really why are we doing it, right? What is the business outcome for us? And more often than not, we know that business outcome is either revenue increase or cost decrease or maybe compliance, right? Those are some of the three of the biggest business drivers which we see. And let's talk about revenue drive, right? So if a blockchain solution helps me as an enterprise in enhancing my revenue stream, if it reduces my revenue leakage, then there will be greater propensity to adopt that. Or if you take it to the cost side, if it helps anyone reduce their costs, especially in the supply chain blockchain that is becoming a very prominent reason to do it, then it will of course lead to greater adoption. And I'll take an example. A lot of non-traditional supply chains. A lot of companies in the technology industry have software which they install on a hardware product and which is given out to a customer. And that sometimes there is a case for a revenue leakage where you are not able to figure out how much is the usability, or you're not able to track your software assets. So that's a classic use case where you can put your entire transaction chain on blockchain and start tracking your revenue generation as well as revenue capture in a much better manner. And that is emerging. So that use case is definitely coming up a lot. Similarly, what I was talking about, a traditional supply chain, connecting all the parties in the chain on a single platform and have greater visibility will eventually lead to lower costs, right? You know where the leakage is happening, you know where your loss is happening, or you know the whole lag in your transaction cycle. Those are some of the drivers which will help the adoption take off more. I know, Jim, you had a perspective as well on that.
Yeah, sure. I'll go real quick. I think it's also about skill set, meaning, like I mentioned, we're changing the way people are going to answer, and again, this is my area of finance and accounting questions. Like, hey, where is that asset? What is the value of all of our fixed assets on our income statement and balance sheet from a property, plant, and equipment? And what I'm saying is that going to a platform like blockchain to solve that problem, it has a lot of benefits, but it is required people to do things a little differently than they're used to. So I think we're going to have an adoption issue of again, how people solve that problem, and a training issue. But also, one thing that comes up, I know Joe had mentioned this on another call we had, is just even the security piece of this. I think there's a interesting not misunderstanding, but having another platform just follows your whole cybersecurity approach and your protocols at any organization. And so blockchain is no more or less secure than anything else that you have in your company. Now, of course, are there interfaces? Yes, but they follow it. So I think Anuj and team, I'd say those are two big people barriers, if you will. But I will argue this, that if you look at the problems that Joe and Anuj laid out, it is clear that blockchain can solve that. Nana, you said it as well. So I think, call it a year, X amount of years, it is coming. And so again, I think that's a barrier to that type of technology.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And in fact, you did mention on a interop, and that's already here. I mean, we already have that. I think the biggest gap is the simpler side of education. Actually, it is about what the capabilities are. So much of what's spoken about around blockchain is about fintech and the speculation of tokens and things like this that is detrimental, in my opinion, to adoption, because in one, it does bring excitement, but the problem sometimes it's misplaced excitement, and sometimes there's a lot of drama around it that isn't necessary if you're trying to build a real system. So to get to the fact that there are real capabilities that can actually be used in this case and others, but they're really simple, base, generic capabilities that are about how to prove that something happened and how to prove that this is the state of the system or of the documents or of all of the things involved at that time, right? So you can go back and look, was this properly done? What mistakes were made, and or oh, that was never completed, we have to complete it now. The fact that the system can tell you that more readily, and a lot of that's for risk and compliance, and how do I avoid getting in trouble or getting fined or anything else. But the other piece that is probably most valuable for adoption is the incentive capability itself. That is, if you have the ability to tune not a single value, and this is going to be a little abstract here, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this, but instead of just saying, oh, because you did X on this date, you get a reward, it's more of something where, because of all of these variables together, you are rewarded. And that's when I'm talking about rewarding or incentivizing, it would be to incentivize vendors in the chain, to incentivize the actors and the actual people that are entering data, that are moving things around, that they are incentivized to be more accurate, and to have and the incentives can be all the way from literally a token-based incentive to a cost-based. Maybe you get a bonus in payment if you follow all these rules, right? It's an interesting thing, and it's we've seen that it's extremely powerful, and it's extremely powerful in a very normal way, and something that doesn't require somebody to be technophile. So it's very useful.
Right. So there's an opportunity to sort of gamify systems and incentivize people instantly, different parties on the system. So yeah, those are all great insights. Thank you for that. I heard a couple of things that I think are super important. So proving a couple of use cases that can confirm those drivers that are increasing revenues, decreasing costs, and then also trying to interconnect the supply chain. So you guys are firsthand dealing with these issues every day. Maybe you can share a couple of success stories of how these capabilities that blockchain can bring to supply chains have been successful or have been scaling. And maybe this time we can start with Jim.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for that one. I'll give you a couple examples, and you heard us touch on it a little bit of the fixed asset world of companies, of where they track fixed assets. So I'll give you first an operational one of reducing costs, because again, how do we know where assets are, what they're are they still in production, are they in their useful life, do they need to be decommissioned? These are things that take, in theory, or not in theory, but in practice, a lot of research, sometimes physical counting, and a lot of people involved. But having this on a blockchain platform, it allows that information to be, again, it's immutable. We know exactly where the asset is, if it's been moved, what have you. We know that. Now, again, that creates issues all the way up front too, about, hey, when was something purchased, when was it ordered? So it permeates all the way down into the budget cycle of a lot of companies in their business units. So what they want to spend for the year, et cetera. And you pull that thread even further, and I talked about property, plant, and equipment, but also one of the biggest things for larger assets is the tax implications of those assets. Where was it bought? Where was it moved? Where is it decommissioned? These types of things, especially in a global world where maybe companies are moving assets around, this has such a tax implication that companies can optimize their tax strategies on this. And so all that to say, Anna, there is huge cost cutting and also revenue generating from a tax perspective on this. So that's one example. And maybe Anuj has another.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jim. Yeah, one example which come to mind, which is very which people can relate to, I would say, is in and I know a lot of all of us have dealt with the DMVs in different states, and there's always this complex scenario there where we do go for different transactions. So one use case which I've seen, and it's yet to be adopted though at different DMVs, is right when a car or automobile is manufactured, get it on the blockchain. So for example, I'm buying a BMW car and it's manufactured in Munich, Germany. So right when it is built, the VIN number is put on the blockchain, right? And from there it is shipped or transported to a port in LA, where the dealer takes delivery, and becomes the custodian or the owner of the car. It moves to the blockchain. The block moves to the dealership. From there, I buy the car, and I am registered on the blockchain. I take it for servicing, for insurance, for various aspects throughout the life cycle of the car. It's all registered on blockchain. When I go to the DMV to get the car registered, the DMV also has it on the blockchain throughout the life cycle. So long story short, all the things are known for that automobile. When it is retired or it is sold again, it is also there, and it is automatically tracked. So that is a use case which is emerging, which I have seen being talked about a lot of times, but I don't know if any DMV has implemented yet, but I know it's coming. You can apply this concept to any real life example out there.
Right. I feel like we can all closely relate to that issue, and it's a huge one.
Yeah.
Joe, maybe from your perspective, some of the things that your company is doing to address these challenges.
Things that we're doing, we've built a few systems out that deal with manufacturing, right? Manufacturing into the consumer, and it all relates to sourcing of products and the process in the manufacturing itself to make sure that you're getting, and a lot of that can be just to attribute quality, that it'd be the same thing as handling recalls or handling issues with batches, that you can do it in a much more granular way. It can be applied to things like when you have import controls, or when you have certain things required for manufacture of items for the military, that they have to know where components of the electronics came from, because there are security, national security issues, that you could push stuff down to that level. That's very important. It can also be, like I mentioned before, potentially a leg up for a smaller company to compete against the Nikes of the world and the Apples of the world, where you might have child labor or slave labor involved. That it's a very key potential to use it to let the consumer know, well, this was a morally produced product, or at least philosophically, however that fits. I mean, there's some really interesting angles there, and really important, because it's in the end, a lot of people will critique blockchain in use, because a lot of times it's not actually used for the value that it could provide. It is literally just blockchain for blockchain's sake, marketing or something else. But what we found is that you have two methods to really counter that, which is the first is if you track as much as possible all of the mundane data. So it's basically anything that goes into the system, even if when I'm actually creating these transactions, it doesn't appear to have any value. I don't need to put this on chain. But the fact that all those transactions create a story that when the consumer gets it, or when it's being looked at for whatever reason in the future, people can see, well, it would be more expensive for them to have done this and faked it at the time than it would be worth doing, or at least then they would know it would be worth doing at the time. So that's the mundane data angle. The other would be if you're trying to get rice to victims of a natural disaster somewhere. And it's the common knowledge that the militaries in certain countries will actually steal the food before it gets to the villages that need it, right? And the fact that you can apply bounties to items on chain to let people, for even relatively small amounts, report these activities, so you know where your leaks are. You can actually, it's not just, oh, I know I had a leak in my supply chain data. It is literally, you can trace it down to a certain branch in the chain that will let you pull out who stole the items, right? So you can stop it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's not about the one single point of data. It's about completing an entire digital history that's trusted of an asset, but that also has to be verified by multiple participants in the value chain. And that's one common thread that I've seen from what Jim and Anuj mentioned as well. All of these success stories where supply chain really has made an impact for making supply chains more efficient, you really need interoperability. And that goes back to something that Joe mentioned earlier. And this perhaps is the biggest challenge. How do you make companies that don't trust each other? How do you create these ecosystems of collaboration? Should it be through a business case, through a carrot and stick approach, or what are your guys' thoughts on that? And maybe we can start with Anuj this time. Or Joe, I think you wanted to mention something.
Sorry, yeah, this is a key point of annoyance for me in the way that a lot of things are built out recently. That how do I say this? One of the major implementers of blockchain, and I'm a fan of this company. They're a big company. They take an approach that I think is wholly wrong, and they still get stuff done, but it's radically inefficient. I think it's bad for the industry. I think it's bad for value, and it's bad for them and their customers as well. And that is that they have a centralized blockchain, and so they go into an industry and they try to create a consortium. And they say, okay, we're gonna create standards for the data and how you interchange data so that you can all be on the blockchain at the same time in a standard way. And it makes sense at some level, but culturally, politically, economically, it doesn't make sense at all, because it's diametrically opposed to all of their actual interest. That if I have a company, what ends up with is you end up just like you do with standards bodies, where you approach a standard, but you end up gaming the periphery of the standard so that you have an edge and against everybody else. And that's what happens, and it's really bad because it makes little projects take forever and everything else. That we think that the approach shouldn't be that. It should be literally be competition based. It should be, you have a product, you have a better product than your competitor. You should put that on chain. To hell with the standards. Make your own standards. Use your own data. You can interop with them. You can interop with all the systems you're already using. It's all, we have some special sauce at Dragon Chain how we do things, but it's all software in the end. And if you can connect to the systems you're already using, you can leverage everything that's already been in place for the past 20, 30 years, however long you've been using it, and tap into all of the new next gen things that are coming out without worrying about getting bogged down in some 24-month standards body where at the end you're all going to be doing the exact same thing and your edge is potentially gone. So it's a weird way that they're doing it. It's actually surprised me that it's gotten any traction. I'm surprised that anybody's done it. And the only reason they have done it is so they can get some marketing out of it. They basically, okay, we'll join in with IBM and this, and it's not that valuable. It's kind of crazy. So sorry.
Right. No, I completely agree. I feel like it goes against the principle of blockchain, that it's about distributed systems, but in the end it ends up alienating the entire industry. And because of the market power, then the rest of the participants don't have the the power that they should. So let's maybe hear Anuj or Jim's perspective
Yeah.
on this.
No, I agree what Joe is saying, but to drive adoption, and especially in case of private blockchains, right? So if there's a large corporation and they want to have their vendors on a private blockchain, they will define their own standards, and eventually it drives their business outcomes. When I started off, so there is a defined business outcome because of which you will spend the time and effort and the money to get on a private blockchain. I think from that perspective, they have the right to define their own standard. But from a more public blockchain, I agree, Joe, what you're saying. It has to be much more open source, and the best technology should have its say. We should not restrict the means there. But there are other motivational factors, right? So you have the purchasing power, and you are a big buyer of goods and services. So you define that, or what Joe was saying earlier, any incentivize your vendors, your customers, your business partners to be on the blockchain. So that's the other way to drive adoption, and I think it will pan out over the next few years how people drive it.
Thanks, Anuj. Jim?
Yeah, the only thing I would add here, those are both really good takes, is that it's about accountability and change. So I really like what Joe mentioned. How do we get accountability above the water so everyone knows what's happening, who bought what, when, for what price, from who, and about change. And what I mean by change is if I'm buying certain things from certain goods and services from a vendor or what have you, that it's okay if I go in saying, hey, I'm going to buy 10 generators at $1 million a piece, but then guess what? A little bit later, we don't need 10. We only need 8, because maybe I sole sort. Then I'm going to change that order and buy 2 from another organization, or another country. My point is that those things then happen above the waterline, so everybody sees. So again, the chain is accountable, which is what Joe is really saying. I really like that. And it's also flexible. Doesn't mean you can't change things. You could do that on a macro scale, like I just talked about, or even a micro, just to say, hey, the connector is on this assembly. Instead of buying 10 from Anuj, I'm only going to buy 8. And guess what? I'm able to quickly go, hey, him as a small vendor, I can pay him within 30 days, as opposed to being a big part of a huge organization, huge assembly that I don't have to make my smaller vendors hit or wait, if you will. But all that to say, what's interesting is that there has to be a marriage, because you asked us about adoption. And I do think, interestingly enough, most of the things we see in the finance and accounting world clearly are mostly private blockchains, to Joe's point. However, I do really like the bigger question and the bigger value that is keeping things above water to hold organizations, countries, leaders accountable for the decisions they make. And then and again, there should be one source of truth to that. So there's a lot of value there.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And continuing with the same insight about how do we drive adoption. I think you mentioned a couple of things there that also depend on consumer demand. So how do you see from a consumer perspective that we should drive adoption? Do you feel like there's a need to educate consumers in provenance of products or demanding accountability, as Jim was mentioning? Or do you feel like this is more of a top-down approach? Or what have you seen in your personal experiences? Joe, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I think it tends to be the case where you definitely don't want to try to educate the consumer on what blockchain is. You want to tie in, let them get their hands dirty as much as they would want to, let them go as deep as they can, give the raw data at the end, have a link behind everything where they can see the raw data and actually test it or whatever they want. Most people won't understand it or care about it. But if you can tie, as an example, we do something where for all of our proof reports, we now have the ability to tie a dollar figure to the amount of proof applied. So when the transaction is secured on Bitcoin and Ethereum, so the transaction itself is in a private area, which the business can expose or not expose, depending upon the situation. But the fact that the proof is secured all the way to Bitcoin and Ethereum and other chains means that we can show metrics, which is since, let's say, since this transaction happened in January of 2020, there has been $2.3 billion worth of hash power, or what of energy applied. And it's extrapolated, it's estimated, but it's a conservative estimate. And that makes people understand, okay, it would be expensive to fake this, which is the main point. So if I'm showing you a picture of, here is this device, potentially here are the raw materials, here's the manufacturer, photos or other evidence of it, here's the where it was the shipping and then the assembly of this product. The fact that you can have even limited evidence in there really gives the consumer something that they can understand, number one, and will value, number two. That it's something that's not there right now. You can't look at any report on your computer and see anything other than here are the parts that are in it. You have no way to know where the parts came from or anything else, and no way to know any of the things you might care about related. So this just lets it be, as transparent as you need it to be. And, in many cases, and if it's something like pharmaceuticals in particular, you would know where they're manufactured. Do I trust that they were made in this country versus that country? You think about Chinese products versus things built in North America or Europe. It's a totally different situation. And it would be really amazing for the consumer to be able to see this on top of the fact that at a glance, they could see if there's a recall, right? Because the report itself would contain information that had been learned since the product shipped, right? So the fact that you can tie it all together and, to what Jim had said even before, that it's a single source. So everything goes in that one place and with various levels of exposure.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's about showcasing the differentiation of every asset and you get that from the digital history that you can gather through blockchain and you can verify. Right. So Jim, I'm gonna transition to you. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah. Again, these are all really great takes. I mean, I've learned just Joe. Those are pretty good because they're really cool answers. One thing I would say is, like, when we say consumer, so for in our world, so there's two types, right? So the consumer is getting used to using this type of technology and going to access it and looking at, like you said, who the companies, like how do they buy their and make their products, holding them accountable from a corporate responsibility, how we look at the products themselves and reviews. That persona as a consumer makes a lot of sense to me. I love that. We also see another persona of consumer, which could be the company themselves. So for us, like when we think of consumer, it could be a large organization, medium or large organization that needs to go, hey, I want to solve our finance and accounting or supply chain issues differently. So what we then have to get them comfortable is just, again, that of how these things work. So again, I see two types of personas of consumer. But then there's a third one where they blend. And what I mean by that is, I mean, we've all seen certain enterprises or industries like, the cannabis industry, there's weed coin, there's all these things. You can look at, Facebook, Google, Amazon, all these ones, they, in theory, they could say, hey, I want to have, face coin or what have you. So, and these things are coming. So if I look at how do we take consumers used to getting info on a chain about products, but then actually interacting like on a crypto side, and back to Joe's point, we don't want to muddy the waters too much, but they will converge at some time. So again, consumers to adopt it, consumers that use it, and then consumers of how they're going to pay. So I think it's an interesting question about how the consumer persona changes.
Yeah. And if I may just add, Anna, so if you further extend the argument, right? So the end consumer or the end customer, if their life is getting enhanced or improved in some shape or form, they will, and some of them will probably not even care about what's the underlying technology behind it. Some of them may be more curious and try to learn it and get deeper into it, as Joe was saying. But for most part, if I am the consumer and whatever I'm transacting, my car example, or there's a big use case on healthcare records, which is out there, it's already real, right? If my life is improving because of blockchain, then I think you just embrace it. like any other technology which is out there. I think the challenge really lies for those enterprises to take that first step and of trying to get all the different parties on the blockchain and get the use case off the ground and the technology and the cybersecurity issues and all those things sorted out. A lay consumer will be more easy to convince and embrace the technology, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think we all agree that blockchain brings enormous business value. But in the end, it's really just about creating cheaper, better, faster processes. And if you cannot do that through blockchain, then it's a moot point.
Yeah.
All right, so we are running a little bit out of time. So I'm going to transition to Andrea Anderson for Q&A.
Great. So right now we'll open it up. Any of the attendees, if you've got questions for the panelists, please feel free to, I didn't see any in the chat, so feel free to jump in now to ask our panelists for questions. You'll need to unmute yourself while you ask, to be able to ask the questions, so feel free to manage that.
Joe did such a good job. No questions.
You left them startled.
Dude, no, that's awesome.
I think Alex had a comment there. So in the chat, I think Alex Wick had some comment around it. Alex,
His
do you
point
have a
about the
question?
climate is, I think it was a
Yeah,
climate
yeah,
application, maybe.
application. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Alex has jumped off the call now. So,
Okay,
Anuj,
okay.
do
All
you want to
right.
read that comment, or do you want to?
I could comment on it.
Yeah,
There-
Joe, totally. Go.
there's stuff in there that you would want to do. I mean, obviously, and I don't understand the world of carbon offsets as much as others, but it is definitely a market. And the fact that you could tie actions directly to transactions on chain to prove your history would be, I think, directly applicable. And it's, I don't know that you guys would consider supply chain, but it is definitely a chain of custody of the things that happened. And with energy, there is definitely a supply chain. So it could be directly involved or directly applied.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll just quickly add a little bit on that. I think it's a super interesting use case, and not only because of the carbon assets, but if you're able to digitize renewable energy credits and to be able to tie the carbon footprint of an asset to the issuance of that credit, and you could sell it or certify it through the blockchain, then that makes a lot of processes more efficient. There are a lot of issues right now with falsification of renewable energy credits, and to be able to certify that a megawatt hour, for example, was in fact produced by a renewable energy source and not by oil or carbon. So yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Anna, one thing I would add to that is Joe made me think about this when he talked about the emergency relief example. Is a real good one. Is that also as funding is approved or companies do invest money in certain different environmental technologies, we will be able to say, hey, we've invested X millions into to have an effect on this area of the carbon footprint. It could get down to very specific to say, okay, over time, as we measure any changes, it doesn't get lost because some of those changes take a few years to materialize. We would be able to, in theory, because how big the chains can get, to say, hey, the investment 3 years ago yielded X. And my point is, the number wouldn't be lost, meaning it wouldn't be like, oh yeah, it was about $1 million, or oh, it was probably like 10 million. And so you have to say, hey, was it worth? But after time, people forget all that. So there's, again, just this level of accountability of how dollars are allocated. If it's business, climate, to hold accountable all those decisions. It's a truly fascinating concept if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. In the end, it's like you mentioned before, it's about accountability and how how we track ESG compliance as well, which is something that we're having a lot of issues at the moment. Right, so if there are no other questions on the chat,
Anna, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
This is Paul Rapino. Appreciate the panel. I'm with Interwork Alliance. Question: when you guys are talking to enterprises, where are you seeing, who's driving the initiative to get supply chain efforts on blockchain? Is it technology side? Is it business side? Is it in the boardroom yet, or is it just all over the place?
Anuj, you want to go first?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Paul, great question. So if I take the world we've been living in, it's interesting. It's been and again, remember, I run a practice called finance transformation, Paul. So to your point, for my direct involvement, it's been more the CFO, controllers, and the different owners of the processes. So that's very specific to finance, Paul. So I would say, like, CFO, controllers, VPs of finance area. Now, all that to say, if I elevate that to the discussion of how blockchain is used in the boardroom, then we start to see a very different discussion in terms of, okay, how are we going to offer this out in the market? So Anuj mentioned the healthcare industry. So as healthcare organizations start to say, okay, how do we tie patient records, with all the security, what's our offering going to be? We see it at that level. So there's an operational level, which is very private. And then there's the persona of the boardroom trying to look at it. So then there's board members, et cetera, and a lot of influencers. So, and again, I'll give a third example, could be in operations like human resource. And we say, hey, HR, how are we going to track our employees? And then also IT, because you mentioned IT, because all these projects, by the way, these are not, if business, like my side, if we have a finance business problem trying to solve, it can't be done without IT. So it's business and IT. They must be done together. It's kind of like any type of automation, but it has to be done together. And then if you look at, but IT could also benefit from it. So Paul, that's a long answer to say it's still evolving. But the interesting part is, as we all just kind of know here, is that the platform is real and it's available. So that's the interesting part. I don't know if Joe or Anuj have a different take.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just to add, so there in any blockchain solution, if you think of it, there are 2 or 3 different components, right? One is a functional component to it, which is the finance or the supply chain. And there you can attach the business side of it. What are the outcomes you're trying to drive? Whether it's cost saving, revenue growth, or something. And then there's always IT component to it, or fintech, or the overall corporate IT component to it. And all those 3 parties have to come together to make it a reality. But you can start with one of them. Usually the functional owner is the one which you can start with.
Yeah, for us, it's usually something strategic. It's it's some capability or some idea that they have to integrate some particular tight use case, and it's usually pretty high level that it comes from. Not always. I'd like to see if it came more from some of the different divisions. If you had accounting that should want this in an organization, you should say IT should want it. The groups that handle paying for insurance, things like that should all be tied in. But we're not quite there yet, I don't think.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add a different perspective on that. So in our experience at Mavenet, we've seen actually that regulators are driving the change. So the US government, for example, the Canadian government is very involved in this initiative. And I believe that it's super useful, and it drives the entire industry because, as we mentioned before, it's a collaboration effort. So how do you align all of these stakeholders? You may need a regulator to step in and to say, okay, actually you need to do this to be compliant. So that'll also help. Mm-hmm.
Yep, great point.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, otherwise I think we're right on time. So Andrea, back to you. I'd just like to thank all of our panelists for your great insights. I know that personally was super valuable to me. So thank you all for your time, and to the attendees as well for attending.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank Anna and Anuj and Jim and Joe for your insights. Right now, so I was going to break us up into different breakout sessions, but since we have a small group already, I'm going to keep everyone in the same group and to start our discussion, okay? The goal of this discussion then is to come up with a few ideas that amongst all of you, okay, attendees as well as panelists if you plan to stay, to come up with ideas that either could help solve challenges that were discussed by the panel or are related to the breakout topic generally. And these ideas, what the goal is then is that these ideas will help inform future initiatives from the Cascadia Blockchain Council and give you opportunities to engage if you desire. There's no limit to the amount of solutions and ideas you can come up with. And in fact, I'll be taking some notes as well to pass along to Nick. So yeah, there's no limit to the amount of ideas and solutions you can come up with, but when developing your ideas, let's try and get a little specific. For example, if we need better interoperability standards, what would be the next step that you would be interested in? Or what organizations and companies would need to be involved? That kind of thing. Okay, so since I'm not breaking you up into groups, what I would love to have happen really briefly is for each of you to go around and do a brief 30-second introduction. Don't be the person that spends 5 minutes introducing yourself. We'd love to know who you are and where you're from, but let's keep it to the 30 seconds so we can start jumping in with some solutions and ideas. Is there one person who would like to be the facilitator of the conversation?
I could, I guess.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alex. And then also if somebody else would like to take notes, that would be great. I'm also going to write down a few things as well, but you all really are the experts on this in this particular topic area. So I think we could get some real more in-depth notes about it if somebody else could do that. Any volunteers?
Finding a volunteer to take notes is generally pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep taking some notes then, and that's not a problem at all. Alex, if you could facilitate though, that would be really great.
Sure. What does that involve besides just going around and trying everyone? Or having everyone
What it involves is just keeping the discussion going and keeping it focused on solutions and ideas. No wrong answers here. And also, so just know that we'll go until 12:15 in this section, okay, in the discussion, and then I'll bring you all back, or I'll send you a link. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I will put the link to the main session in the chat so that you can all click that and jump back to the main session. Does that sound all right?
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right. So with that, Alex, take it away.
Hey, so I guess we should all go around and just give a 30-second intro to ourselves. My name's Alex Wick. I'm the founder or co-founder and CEO of Cascadia Carbon. We're a climate tech startup which is using a custom-built low-energy blockchain to store carbon offsets from both individuals and enterprises. Anyone want to go next?
Hi, yes, this is Paul Rapino. I'm in Seattle with a startup called Interwork Alliance, and we work on supply chain sustainability and DLT security, blockchain framework standards, and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Who's next?
I can go next. Hi, I'm Amanda Hedgecock. I'm a first-year MBA student at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. oops. Prior to school, I was working at PayPal out of Baltimore, and so interested in the financial services applications of blockchain, but also government usages.
Thank you. And Alex, how about I just jump in and select people to go around? It looks like, so you all met Joe. Joe, do you want to just give a real quick, for those who weren't here at the beginning, what your company is? Okay, how about Marina? Shahyar? All right. Well, we're just gonna jump right into it then. Okay, let's do that.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay, so again, just as a refresh, what we're looking at in this discussion is to come up with a few ideas that either could help solve challenges discussed on the panel or are related to the breakout topic generally of supply chain. We're hoping to inform future initiatives for the Cascadia Blockchain Council. So that's what that's about. All right. I'll put it on mute for myself here. Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess thinking about blockchain and supply chain, we're mostly doing like a carbon offset chain. So basically utilizing blockchain's immutability to provide security and prevent double spend. As far as supply chain, though, I think blockchain does have a lot of applications for carbon accounting, which is basically the process of determining how much carbon is produced by moving goods from one place to another. So for example, I'll give an example. I ordered something from Patagonia and it shipped from Reno, Nevada, went to Seattle, went to Kentucky, went back to Reno, back to Kentucky, and then up here to Vancouver, British Columbia, where I'm living. And just looking at it, that cannot be the most efficient way. They're burning probably 3 times the amount of fuel, maybe 5 times the amount of fuel. So I think reducing those inefficiencies in the supply chain is imperative if we're going to hit our climate targets. And I think blockchain should be able to help with that. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, there's no question. I think we all have pockets of wins, and we're all the big fans of blockchain DLT. It would be really interesting how to get, and I asked the question of Jim earlier, who are the influencers that are really going to make a difference, and what do they need to see to validate you know, this being beyond more than fiction or more than, you know, the next hype. I think there's also a, you know, at the highest level, I think there's still a misunderstanding of, you know, blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain that needs to be addressed. But then you take it down into supply chain, and it, to me, I'm not a supply chain guy. I just see the, you know, the business side of it for our MBA friend or student, I guess. Totally from a, you know, from a business point of view, you can see all the touch points, but tactically, I guess, what are the working steps to identify the, you know, the real problem?
And one thing I'm thinking, just thinking a little more about this, I mean, blockchain at its core is a chain of blocks which are built on top of each other. So the first block's hash is incorporated into the second block's hash. The third block's hash has both the first and second block's hash incorporated into it, which basically makes it near impossible to alter any of the previous blocks. You know, that, and when you describe it that way, it seems that like almost every single shipment could have its own blockchain, where like if you ship something, it starts with an origin block. And then if it goes to, for like Louisville, Kentucky, it would get another hash on top of the first one. Then to Seattle, it would get a third hash. But I'm I mean, that's sort of like how it could be utilized, but I think at a larger scale, maybe a blockchain of blockchains. I don't know. I'm sort of thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I mean, given that we're a major shipping point, Andrea, are you in Seattle with the WTIA?
I am in Seattle with WTIA, correct.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay. It would be interesting to, maybe reach out to some of the shipping companies or, and just understand kind of what the real problems are we're trying to solve. I know the working groups at Cascadia blockchain, we've done DFI and government stuff, but, supply chain seems to be one of the next buzzwords, or not really buzzwords, use cases. So it'd be interesting if the team took on supply chain, that they'd reach out like they did with DFI on some stakeholders and ask what the real problems are. And then you have people like Joe and ArcBlock and others who have potential solutions, who could put more meat on what that problem set is and what the use case might be.
Yeah,
Great.
it's interesting you say
Thanks,
like
Paul. Yeah.
determining the problems, because I think that that should be prerequisite for any solution, is sort of find a problem and find a solution for it, not find a solution and then find the problems which the solution fits.
Yeah. Yeah, because my take is and I'm also director in Seattle of TF Blockchain, and we do conferences and work with the team here with Ari and so forth. But there's fans almost in every company, and we get events. There's junior level new person to the CFO or a CEO, and getting meat on a project, or at least a proof of concept maybe, would be really helpful probably to them to sell this into their organization. So that might be something to consider. And Alex, I'm curious on the carbon side. I mean, to me, that seems like a subset of a larger supply chain problem. But what's interesting about carbon is it's kind of the new buzzword. It's like, oh, this is great. We should all be carbon positive or neutral or negative rather. Where are you seeing the market, and where do you see your opportunities short term in terms of what you're selling, and where would you need help?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I wouldn't really call carbon a buzzword, just because climate change is real. It's happening now, and it's going to be a way bigger problem than any of us can even imagine, I think. Certainly scientists are telling us we're hitting like worst case scenarios in terms of melting ice, in terms of flooding, hurricanes, fires, all that. I'll try not to beat a dead horse, but carbon is essential or quantifying carbon and tracking who's producing it, who's sequestering it. The whole carbon cycle is going to become, I think, vitally important for our species over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why I really think of it as a growth industry. As far as sorry, and then I maybe lost track here.
Well, first, yes, I didn't mean to imply that carbon was a buzzword in the sense of it'll just go away in a week. It is definitely hot though in the boardroom and all the way down to the grassroots, and it's just a matter of what are people actually going to do about it. And I'm fascinated at IWA. We're just digging into this, that there's a whole marketplace on the finance side of billions of dollars being traded against carbon credits. And that was like, wow, I had no clue, so there's some real activity happening there. Kind of, I guess the second piece of it, or the second part of my question or topic was what can be done at the use case level to actually show impact. Like as is today, there's nothing there, and we're negative and we need to buy credits, or we're positive and need to buy credits rather, versus what is the to be once a solution is, or a point of proof of concept is developed.
Yeah. Yeah, carbon's an interesting space to work in because there is the compliance market, and that's been around since probably the early 80s, probably even earlier. And that's sort of like an industry insider. They basically trade carbon credits with each other. So they all get a allotted amount of carbon credits. You're a steel producer, or a cement maker, or a tech company in California, I think. It depends. Some industries are covered, some are not. But they basically get this carbon allowance, and then they're supposed to efficiency. I just made up a word. They're supposed to make their operations more efficient. And in that way, they can like claim carbon credits.
Right.
The thing about that market, it almost seems like it's, first of all, carbon's way undervalued, and it sells for between like 2 cents and $2 a ton. Even in California, I think it's at like $16 a ton, which sort of, I feel like that almost, I don't want to say pollutes the market, but it sort of gives this false hope that like we can solve it with like this low carbon pricing. But really, I mean, the reason climate change is occurring is we're producing way too much carbon, and trees are not able to suck down enough of that carbon.
Right.
Until we like either slow our production or make it much more efficient or plant way more trees, that cycle is not going to be balanced. And so there's not, I mean, if you're shipping something from China to the US, there's no way you can, currently there's not a way you can do that without burning fossil fuel.
Right. What are there auditors, professional auditors that audit the validation of these offsets?
Yeah, so there's a market around validation, accreditation, and production of carbon offsets. There's companies like 3 Degrees, Gold Standard, American Carbon Registry, I believe, and they'll do like third-party audits of protocols. So if you conserve 280 forests in Northern California, you'll get a third-party auditor to verify, to audit your project and verify that that carbon is indeed being sequestered. It's additional, above and beyond business as usual. And also without leakage, which just means that like you're not roasting adjacent timberland instead of that timber.
I have a, sorry, let me jump in just for a second. I think this is a really, really great idea. And what I'm wondering is if we can start to narrow it into what are some projects around this that we could do to help drive adoption or really push blockchain forward in this area. So what I heard Paul say before was talking about, reaching out to the shipping companies to identify what the problems are and bring those together like you did with DFI and government and all that. But are there any other policies or strategies, education, or types of campaigns that blockchain, we could do to really advance blockchain in this area? What do you guys think? And Paul, I'm sorry if I interrupted a thought you were having. Feel free to jump in with that.
No, I'm good. Thanks for clarifying kind of where we want to go. Well, I know that WTIA has taken on the policy side of it. I don't know if supply chain would want to go there yet, because that's a whole different, there's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit that we could, I know there's a lot, and I'll look up and send you the name. I interviewed with them, but I know they're like the high-tech shipping company, and they want to really transform the way they want to run their business. Companies like that would seem like if they could get on board and help identify a use case, it might just be that WTIA or Cascadia blockchain comes along as I don't want to say a PR wing, but to really help develop that use case and then some publicity around it, some outreach, use case discussions, to show that there's some reality to a supply chain, but at a tactical level. I think sustainability is just a huge opportunity for WTIA to, I don't want to say market themselves, but use as a way to add value to the community, because everybody's thinking about it, from Amazon to Microsoft to startups like Alex and whatnot. So yeah, I would say at that level, I don't want to say PR, but maybe gather the best practices currently, and then see where the gaps are.
Okay.
I got to imagine that everybody's looking at sustainability. I know Microsoft and Amazon are for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically now we just have to get a larger company to provide the shipping or supply chain data and get that on a blockchain and start quantifying the carbon. I know we've actually started speaking with Patagonia about potentially doing something with their shipment carbon calculation. But yeah, I mean, like Paul said, I mean, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Google, Stripe, Lyft, all these big tech companies are being pushed by their stakeholders and stockholders and shareholders and even C-level employees to wake up and say, hey, like what we're doing is not sustainable in any sense of the word, and we need to start calculating that. And then hopefully, and what I sort of see is hopefully redefining value to be, if we can unexternalize carbon costs, I think it will ensure our survival on the planet. And sort of getting to the big picture philosophical.
Alex, you're breaking up. I can't hear you on that. I didn't hear your last couple sentences.
Yeah.
I was probably getting too philosophical. Zoom just cut up my audio.
Well, what I was hearing you kind of go towards before you started cutting out was there's an actual education piece to this, right? So do you have any ideas of how we could really develop an education strategy around this using blockchain?
I'm not an educator, so I don't know. I mean, there absolutely is, though. There's, individual education.
Well, I think if WTIA could just poll their members and see who's got an initiative, send in your best practices. We're going to do a session in March on as is sustainability versus 2B, and generate buzz in the network.
Mm-hmm.
Then you look and see kind of what are the best practices, how do we share them. I think, as I recall, you guys were talking about or did, what do they call it? Not a road show. Obviously we can't do it live. What do you call it when everybody comes to the event and they show their wares, they show their best practices?
Roundtable?
No, it's like like at conferences, they have the best practices booths.
Mm-hmm.
I know that WTIA has talked about doing that before, like a bake-off, not a bake-off, but anyway, some way to get these companies to do a 5-minute demo, like this, to say, here's what we're doing, here's what, that kind of thing is always interesting, especially I think you have the overhead driver of these companies wanting to continue to embrace that sustainability mantra.
Paul, I know what you're talking about, and I'll think about it, and because it's right on the tip of my tongue, and I will let you know if it pops into my head before we
Okay.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I think if you guys did do that, it would be important, or it would be helpful. Each company came to the roundtable, or whatever you want to call it, with not only what they're doing, but some of the problems they're seeking to solve. within their organization. Because I think anytime you can sort of explicate your problems to a larger, wider group, a lot of people have different perspectives and they can weigh in and they might be able to solve them for you. Direct you to someone who's trying to solve them.
Mhm.
So that could be very valuable.
Okay. So what else besides sustainability and carbon offsets? Are there any other ideas of projects within the supply chain realm that we could think about or bring up as a way to drive blockchain forward? Or
Yeah, I think you got to look at it from a technical side and then a business side.
okay.
And so once we start getting, once you start getting use cases in or best practices, you can determine are those are those driven from the business side or are those technology side? And I think one of the panelists brought it up that you have to have both, obviously, but somebody's driving it. And the technology side might need more marketing and the business side might need more technical support,
Okay. Great.
Yeah, I don't really have any other ideas other than climate tech. That's what I do. That's
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. All right. Well, it's 11:42. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about, share, or
No, I
around?
think if it's just this topic and kind of feedback into the larger group, I don't have anything else.
Okay.
What's
Yeah.
the rest of the afternoon? We end at 1:30, right?
You end at 1:30. Yeah. And so
what's next?
at 12:15, the main groups will start up again. So in chat, I put the link for the main session. You guys will have a little over 30 minutes before that starts, so you get a little break in between now and then. So go ahead and grab that link back so that you can enter into the main one at 12:15.
So that's the one we were on with the bigger group?
Yeah, correct. Yep. And then Paul, what I'm going to do, and Alex, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share these notes with Nick and Ari, and so that they'll compile all that information into one big package from each of the different breakout sessions that were done today.
cool.
Okay.
All right, I think I'm going to take the next 30 minutes to clean up the broken glass from my car, and I'll be back.
Alex, that is horrible. I'm sorry that happened.
It's like,
What happened?